Hey folks, you're most likely watching this video right now because you are in my 8th grade woodshop and you are ready to enter the second semester. In our second semester woodshop, we're actually going to be using some hand tools at home to build things like this simple chair. You're going to build a much better chair than I did here. This is just a prototype of what you're going to build. But to build it, you're going to need a back saw. So everybody will be sent home with a back saw. You'll have a back saw that looks like this. You're also going to end up with what's called a miter box and some clamps. So we're going to take a couple minutes and I'm going to show you how to safely use the back saw, miter box, and the clamps. Let's go. The first thing we need to remember whenever we're working with any tool is that you should always wear safety glasses. So make sure you have safety glasses on when you're working with the back saw. The next thing we should talk about are the clamps. You're going to use these clamps to keep the piece of wood that you're cutting securely fastened down to the table where you're working. If you don't use clamps, it's going to be tempting to hold the piece of wood with one hand and the saw with the other. And this can put you in a risky position where the saw could actually cut your hand. So we want to make sure we're always securely fastening the piece of wood that we're cutting. There's really about 3 different ways to do this. The first is with the clamps. So to use our clamps, we open and close our clamps by pulling the metal tab on the back of the clamp back and then sliding the clamp. From there, we can twist this handle and it'll tighten down the jaws of the clamp. You want to make sure you don't pinch your finger between the metal tab or the jaws of the clamp. That would be very painful. Also, don't drop the clamp on your foot. That wouldn't feel very good. And remember, this is not a hammer, it's just a clamp. It's just used for clamping things down. So to clamp something down, I'm going to pull the tab, turn the handle, open the jaws, and then tighten the jaws down on the piece of wood and the table underneath it. Don't do this on your fancy dining room table. You're going to leave marks in it. Try to do this on an old table or a bench. So I'm going to open the jaws up, push it down, tighten the handle down. Typically, you need more than 1 clamp to securely fasten a piece of wood, so I'm going to use 2. And again, I'm opening it up, pushing it together, and then tightening the handle. The wood is now securely fastened to the table, and it's ready for me to cut it. Now, there's another way you can fasten a piece of wood down if it's long enough. If you have a piece of wood that's over 2 feet, you can actually use your knee to hold it down, and it will securely hold it while you're cutting. I know this sounds a little bit silly, but people have used this technique for hundreds of years, and it's actually very safe. Let me show you how it works. So this is an old trick that's been around for a long time. Since we've had saws, people have used this trick to cut wood. So here I have a piece of wood, and I want to cut it right on my line right there, but I don't have any clamps. So what I'm going to do is take a chair or a bench or something about 18 inches tall. For me, that works for my height. You might actually want something shorter. I'm going to take the piece of wood, I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to put the place that I want to cut about 4 fingers away from the edge of my surface. Then I'm actually going to lean over, I'm going to put all my weight onto the piece of wood, and I'm going to hold it with my left hand. Now, my left hand is going to be 6 inches away from the saw when I'm cutting. That's right, I want you to keep it 6 inches away. If you don't know what 6 inches is, if you do your shaka bra like this, from the tip of your finger to your thumb, for most of you guys is going to be about 6 inches. It might actually be a little bit bigger, but try to stay that far away. So let me show you how it works. This is cool. I'm going to stand over it, I'm going to put all my weight on the piece of wood, and I'm going to hold the piece of wood with my hand, just like that. When I have it there, I can then start my cut. The wood was secure the whole time I was cutting, and I didn't even need to use any clamps. Now let me show you 2 really important things. I'm right-handed. Because I'm right-handed, my left knee is sitting on the wood and my left hand is holding the wood. You don't want to try to sit across it like this. You could still do this, and you'd still cut, and you'd still be safe, but it would feel really awkward. So you want to make sure you keep your left knee on the wood, if you're right-handed, left hand 6 inches away from the blade. It's amazing how effective this technique is. Just remember, you want to try to cut a piece of wood that's at least 2 feet long. If you try to cut a small piece of wood, like this, obviously, it's not really going to work. The third way to clamp the piece of wood is to use a miter box with your wood. Let me show you that. The last way to safely cut the wood is to use what's called a miter box. Now, this box has a lip along the back edge of the yellow box. You're going to take that lip, you're going to push the box over the table, the surface where you're cutting, and you want that lip to hook on the edge of the table. The cool thing about this is if you're pushing forward, that lip will not allow the miter box to move, and it's effectively clamped to the table as long as you're pushing forward and you have it set up the way I have it set up. Now you can use the miter box in conjunction with a clamp or two if you really want to secure your wood, or sometimes you can use the miter box just by itself. Watch how I do this. I've got the miter box locked down to the table. I'm going to put the piece of wood I want to cut in the miter box. I'm going to slide the wood all the way over to the edge of the box. I'm pushing tight against the edge of the box. I'm going to take my saw and I'm continuing to push in this direction. That will help keep things clamped. I'm going to keep my hand 6 inches away and then I'm going to cut. Because I'm always pushing this direction, the wood in the box will not move as the box is hooked on the edge of the table. If you want to add a clamp, you can also add a clamp. Sometimes it's helpful to have one. This will keep everything from moving, especially if you want a nice, precise cut. So remember, we have the clamps, we have the trick I showed you where you can put your knee over the wood, so keep your hand 6 inches away, or you can also use the miter box by itself or with a clamp. Now let's talk about a few general safety tips that you need to keep in mind when you're using the saw. Clamping the piece of wood that you want to work with is obviously an important part of learning how to use the saw safely. But you also need to think about the saw itself. This saw has sharp teeth on it. That's what cuts the piece of wood. So remember, when you're using the saw, you're working with sharp teeth. You never want to walk around with the saw pointed forward like this. You always want to keep the saw pointed down at your leg when you're not using it. Also, when you're not using it, put it in the middle of the table where you're working, not on the edge of the table. We don't want the saw to fall. If the saw falls, it can hit the ground and it can actually dull the teeth. So we want to treat it really carefully so the teeth stay sharp. Also, we don't want you to get cut by the saw while it's sitting on the table. When you're actually using the saw, remember, you never want to force the tool. We're going to spend more time talking about technique and how to cut, but just remember, you don't want to force the tool. Always let the saw do the work. And like I've said before, try to keep your hand about 6 inches away from the blade while you're cutting. If you keep your hand 6 inches away and you don't force the tool, it'll be a really, really safe tool for you. Finally, when you're done using the saw, make sure you take good care of it. Put it somewhere safe. Keep it away from small children or someone that might abuse it, and make sure you keep the blade sharp. A dull tool is actually more dangerous than a sharp one, so let's take care of our tools. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys learned something. I'll see you soon.